Junk journals are such a unique expression of creativity. I'm confident in creating them now from all the skills I've learned over the years. Lately, I've been thinking about if I could go back in time and give myself advice when I was just starting on my junk journal journey. What would that advice be? So today I have got 10 things I wish I knew as a junk journal beginner that I am sharing with you. I'll be showing you some examples of junk journals throughout the video, but I'm also going to share with you an idea for creating a very simple junk journal. This is great if you're a beginner, if you don't really know where to start. This is going to be a good project that if you complete it, it's going to give you some confidence and some encouragement to keep going. The first thing I wish I knew as a beginner to junk journaling is the definition of junk journal. Why would I have liked to know this? Because I didn't know if I was doing it right. There was such ambiguity in this term, this expression of junk journal, that I didn't know if I was breaking rules, even if I wanted to follow rules. Very often I had this feeling that I'm not doing it right. I was just doubting myself. What if I'm not using junk? Is this still a junk journal? What is a junk journal? So let me explain what is a junk journal. A junk journal is a handmade book of recycled or repurposed materials and ephemera, often with a mix of writing, collage, and art. Now they're called junk journals because the idea is that you take things that you already have, leftovers, scraps, reusing things that you already have so that you can give them a second life. You're building a book from scratch, so since you are using secondhand things, there's a little bit more creative freedom in the materials that you choose. There's also freedom in the assembly of this book, so it doesn't need to look like a traditional, formal book. Okay, so have you got the most important points there? You are creating a book from scratch, you're using materials that you already have, and there's creative freedom in doing that. The second thing I wish I knew as a beginner to junk journaling is that you don't need to use junk in your junk journal. Of course, you can stick with secondhand materials if you want to in your junk journals, but if you want to buy a digital printable kit, then you absolutely can. The most important thing is that you are inspired to create. You are motivated to see the completion of this book. So if you want to have some images or things that are going to help you get there, then I definitely believe that you should be able to buy them if you want to. Say, for example, that you are creating a junk journal with the theme of outer space, and you have a few things, but you really want something to tie it all together. You happen to find a digital kit on Etsy, for example. It's not expensive. You can download it, print it, and then use some of those pages for your journal. If it gets you excited about creating, then I think your junk journal can be as curated as you want it to be. The next thing I wish I knew as a beginner to junk journaling is to start with smaller projects before moving on to bigger ones. I've made a lot of junk journals. What I like to do with several of them was that I would focus on a very specific task. Sometimes I would focus more heavily on the covers, like this one, for example. I wanted to experiment with using tissue paper and getting these creases in here and the little discolorations and the hardware and the stitching. This one was all cover. Other times I wanted to focus specifically on the pages inside. So this little tiny junk journal, the cover is Scotch tape packaging. I did absolutely nothing to it. What I wanted to experiment with was a little bit with the stitching. I used a 5-hole pamphlet stitch type of binding. I wanted to experiment with putting on these little beads, and then I also wanted to experiment with putting in the pages on the inside and what I could do. Here I wanted to practice with using some rubber stamping and using postage stamps. I used washi tape. That is it. That's all I wanted to do in this one. So focusing on topics or areas of a specific junk journal might be helpful to you for not getting overwhelmed with all the things that you possibly could do in a junk journal. It helped to make those projects manageable when I would focus in a specific area. The next thing I wish I knew as a beginner to junk journals is that pre-planning helps a lot. Imagine that you want to create this junk journal and that it's going to be so beautiful and it's going to have charms and embellishments and it's going to have sewing in it and it's going to have really beautifully collaged pages and the cover is just going to have lots of details in it, right? Stop yourself and say, whoa, wait a minute here. Let's figure out a plan. What about figuring out a theme for this junk journal so that you can start picking your materials, your supplies with intention? What about, figuring out what you already have and what you may need? Just doing a little bit of planning really helps to focus your energy and to get you on the right path so that you don't start a project and then halfway realize, oh my gosh, I took on too much. Set your expectations correctly so that you can meet your goals and enjoy the process. The next thing I wish I knew as a beginner is that junk journaling is all about experimentation. It's about trying things and seeing what you like. Maybe you want to experiment with the binding. Maybe you want to do a straight stitch or you want to do a cross stitch. Maybe you try it once and you're like, no way, stitching is too much for me. I need something simpler. Maybe I just want to do hole punches with a little bit of twine to hold things together. Maybe I want to use a stapler. Maybe I want to use ring binding, right? Try a bunch of different things so that you can figure out what is your style, what you like to do. The next thing I wish I knew as a beginner is that you don't need to sew in your signatures. For a long time, I thought this was the way you're supposed to do it. You're supposed to do these pamphlet stitch binding or cross stitch binding to create your journals, and that was that. This can be very daunting and it can stop a lot of people from wanting to try. But then I learned other methods. I used ring binding, like so for example, this is so useful. I love ring binding. So I learned that there are other things to do, and I think one of my favorite methods is using the long arm stapler. I bought one, it was under $20, I got it off of Amazon, and I love it for putting together really secondhand books of materials, especially pages from magazines that are very thin. I can put a whole bunch together, fold them in half, and then staple them into a junk journal. The next thing I wish I knew as a beginner to junk journaling is that creating the junk journal itself is just the first part. Deciding what you want to put inside of it is a completely separate thing, and for me, that's the fun part. Now, for some people, creating the junk journal is the fun part. They want to make them to get good at the skills of creating a junk journal, right? And they use them as gifts or whatever, finish one and then start another one. But for me, the idea of what goes in the pages is, I think it's more exciting than the actual creation of the junk journal itself. So do you want to use it for bullet journaling? Do you want to use it for keeping your to-do lists? Do you want to make a glue book out of it? Do you want to use it for a Bible journal? You can do so many things with a junk journal. Having those two things separate helped me not get overwhelmed with the tasks of creating them. So I would focus on creating the junk journal first, And then once the junk journal was done, I could turn my attention to what I wanted to put on those pages. The next thing I wish I knew as a beginner to junk journaling is that you can return to your books many times over the years. Now, again, some people want to create a junk journal and just pass it on, move on to starting the next junk journal. For me, when I have something like a glue book where I am collaging inside of the junk journal, look at all these blank pages, right? I can come back to these pages years later and continue to add things to it. So having this flexibility of being able to return to it is so nice. It makes me feel like I'm coming back to an old friend, right? Or that there is pieces that I find and set aside specific. I have a junk journal with the color red, for example. So if I find something like, ooh, this would go really well in my red junk journal. So sometimes I do have boxes and things where I just hold special items for very specific junk journals. So in a way, it feels like this junk journal is a living thing, right? It's growing, it's changing. And I love that. I love when I'm able to interact with it and to come back to and put things in that are special to this junk journal. The next thing I wish I knew, and I guess this is kind of more of a personal thing, but I'm sharing it with you nonetheless. As a beginner, gift them with caution. I have given junk journals as gifts to people, and their responses have been odd, I guess is the nicest way to put it. Okay, so junk journals are not everybody's cup of tea. That we know, that we understand. Some people have never seen one before, and you can imagine if you've never seen something before, you might be perplexed or not know what you're supposed to do with it or how to use it. And so that could be the case of a person who receives a junk journal. I gave one as a gift, as I said. I wasn't there to give it to them in person. I sent it through somebody else, and that was the mistake. If I would have said, this is a junk journal, let me show you what it is and how to possibly use it and why they're special. If I would have given that speech while I gifted a junk journal, I think the response could have been different. But now I know that in general, I would rather just hold on to them myself. Or if there's somebody who I know already has a background or knows what a junk journal is, then of course they make great gifts. Now, junk journals also make great gifts for teenagers and kids, mostly because, yeah, they've never seen one before. But if you make them simple and you create that little spark of interest. And in the past, I used, candy boxes like Skittles or M&M boxes as covers with a stapler. And then, almost like this, where you're just taking scraps from coloring books or pattern paper or food packaging. I think, yeah, I've got a box here from Jell-O, right? If you gave this to a child, I think that they would get a kick out of it. And who knows, it might spark something in them so they will be interested to create their own in the future. The last thing I wish I knew as a beginner to junk journaling is that time is your friend. It's so easy to get overwhelmed with all of the things, all the parts of creating a junk journal, right? And to get bogged down in, say, stitching for the spine or how you're going to do the covers. There's many steps, but embracing the education part and that you are learning has been really key for me to enjoy how long it takes to put all of this together. All right, are we ready to make a very simple junk journal? Now I've got a couple things on my desk to recommend. First is this food packaging. This was for crackers. If you want, you can use something like this as covers for your junk journal. So I cut off the top and one of the sides and the bottom, of course. What's really nice about this is the part for the spine binding, and the cardboard overlaps right here. I think you can see it a little bit better with this one. So there is a doubling up right here in this spine, which I know means that it's going to be really sturdy. If I was going to use this as a cover, I might do a little bit of pattern paper in here and it would also make it a little bit more sturdy. But this is pretty much good to go as far as, you know, being ready. I might also cover this up, this non-GMO notification here, but I wouldn't do too much embellishing other than that. So food packaging is a great way to start with a junk journal. Now I'm going to make a small junk journal from an envelope. I wish that I had one that already came through the mail, but I don't. I just have this new envelope. This is a 6x9, so it's going to be a small junk journal. Okay. Now, in addition to the cover, I have paper inside. I have this paper that was dyed from avocados, so I'm going to use that as some of the pages. And then I just have some other kinds of scraps in here that might be ideas that I could use for pages. What I like to do in the past is take tissue paper, ordinary tissue paper that you get, you know, in a gift, for example. If you fold them together and then just use glue stick in between, really makes a nice paper that you can use as a page. And of course it has this very nice crinkly sound. So that's an option as well. Here's one that's already folded. This one's actually a little bit thicker, but it's an interesting texture, and that's what you want, is a bunch of different kinds of paper with different kinds of textures. So I have a bunch of different kinds there. I also have a few printables. These are left over from old projects that, you know, I had just extra pages left, and so I might cut out some pieces out of this to use. And I also have some of my own printables that I sell in my Etsy shop. So some of these might be the right size that I can also use in this journal. So yeah, there's some good material here. So I'm going to, well, let's work on the covers first, and then I will choose the papers afterwards. So if this is 9 inches, half of that is 4.5, right? And I want to go 1/4 of an inch to the left and 1/4 of an inch to the right. So that is where I scored. So now I will just fold this. Okay, doesn't need to be a hard crease, just enough so that I know where the spine is. Okay, now for the inside, I want to use something that's going to make it a little bit more stable. So I can take any kind of food packaging, cut it down, and I'm going to just slide it in here. So you can choose what you want to be the front and the back. There's this nice flap, which is the, you know, envelope flap. You can decide if you want to leave it open so that you could use that as a pocket, or if you want to close it entirely, okay? I'm going to keep it open and use it as a pocket. So I'm going to slide in my paper piece all the way to the end over here. I don't need to glue it because it's going to be held still. It's not going to move. Once I have my papers stitched into here, this is not going to move. But this side, this one I might stick down a little bit more permanently. So what I will do is I will push this down in here, and then I will use a little bit of tape, double-sided tape, to hold that in place. So I will undo a little portion of this and bend it so that I have it sticking out. Then I put the placement right where I want it. So I'll just move it in so I don't see it. And then now I can go ahead and pull the rest out. And now I have a pocket, a space. It's also reinforced, so it's a little bit stronger. Okay, so now that is my cover. Now I want to choose my papers that are inside. So I'm just going to choose a bunch of several of these and cut them down to the right size. Say, for example, that I want to use one of these. Then I will just go over here, measure, and say, oh yeah, okay, that's about the right width. I just need to cut it down a little bit from one of the sides. And I'm just going to grab a stack of these and make a signature, which is a grouping of papers that are folded together. Okay, so here is my signature. Super cute. I love it already. It's a nice amount of paper, not too much, not too little, because I also know that as I add things on here, it's going to thicken up just the tiniest little bit. So I actually might even have too many papers in here. Let me see, how many sheets do I have? So 1, 2, 3, 4. I also use book page. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 pages, is that too much? Well, I'm just going to put in 10, and if it's too much, then I can always tear one out later. But I think it's good. I think it's good. All right, now I need to bind it in here. How do I do that? So I'm going to take a pencil and mark first where I want the markings to be, or where I want the holes. I'm going to do a 3-hole pamphlet stitch. It's a very basic stitch. So I need 3 points. So I'm going to pick right in the middle, and I'm just eyeballing this. It's not anything precise. Okay, 2 and 3. I will do the cover after I have done the pages. Now, you can get a special tool called an awl, A-W-L, that cuts holes into, or punctures holes into something, but I'm just using very sharp scissors, and I'm just going to go back and forth until I cut a hole in all of these pages. Just going carefully until I can feel my finger. There we are. So it does help to have a binder clip. I don't have a binder clip, so I'm just going to use 2 magnets to hold these together. Now that I have my 3 holes, I can take a pen or a pencil. Just by folding it in half, I can see where the paper is protruding, and I can make a mark on here and know where those holes are. 1, 2, 3, there. Okay. And then I will do the same thing here. Okay, now I have this embroidery thread. I'm going to take one of these strands. Okay, I'm going to thread my needle. Here are my pages with my holes in it. I want to add one more small piece, kind of like a pocket inside. So I'm going to make sure that I add this onto here. Let me temporarily stick my little needle in here, there, just to hold it in place while I put the magnet back there. Okay, there we are. Okay, so I have my holes in here as well. 1, 2, 3. And what I want to do is when I sew in my signature, I'm going to have the leftover string, and the leftover string is going to be inside here, and then I'm going to seal it shut on the side so that the string doesn't show. And I can either make a pocket or I can completely seal it. So I'm not sure yet what I'm going to do, so I will see later. So since the thread is going to be on the inside, I start on the inside. And here I push it through. Okay. So then it goes all the way across up to the top one. And then I have one more last through here. Yeah, it's very difficult to show on camera. Now, when I push it through, oops, I lost it for a second there. I want the string, the one where it went in, to come on one side, and where it comes out, I want it to be on the other side of the string that goes down the middle. Does that make sense? I hope I'm making sense here. Make sure it's nice and tight. Yes, it is. Now I'm just going to tie a very simple square knot. So this is the right side and it's going over. That's what a square knot is. So that when you tie the second one, the right side is now going to go under and this one goes over. Okay, there. Okay, cut off the excess. This is what I'm left with. Now I can decide, I can do double-sided tape or do glue, and I can completely close this so you don't see the thread inside, or I can leave a small pocket, right? It's kind of a nice thing to have, you know, to decide. Okay, so here are all my pages. Looks very nice. Very happy with it. Press these down. Now I can do the covers. I can decorate the front, decorate the back, decorate the inside and the outside. I have my pocket at the back side, which is nice. That's where I wanted it. And it's already a nice weight, so I like that. Let me cut one of these out and see how it looks. Okay, so I've got a couple of pieces to play with here. Maybe I want to do something like this where I glue down just the edges and leave this open so that I can stick something like that in here. That would be very cool. Let me just go ahead and do that right now before I change my mind. And then I've got this awesome piece of currency that goes there. This one, well, this one I can put somewhere else, right? Maybe I'll put it here. I've got some big decisions to make for the cover, so I'm going to leave it for now so that I can think about it for a few days. Alright, so if you have enjoyed this video, if you have found the information to be useful, please do hit the like button so that it can spread to others. If you have some suggestions or advice for beginners of junk journals, please do share in the comments. I would appreciate that also very much. And if you're looking for more information about starting with glue books or what's the purpose with glue books, then check out this video right here. I will see you in the next one.